I've got a lot of questions for you. I've got a lot of things I want to know personally. You've been trained by the man, the myth, the legend, Father Ripperger, so I'm sure you've got all kinds of things you can help me out with. But could you just define for our audience a little bit, what the heck is mental health? Because that phrase gets thrown around all the time, and I feel like people actually don't know what it means.
Yeah, so it depends on who you're asking, because there's a modern secular definition of what mental health is, and I think even within that realm, there's a lot of disagreement on what it is, and it's kind of vague. And then there's the Thomistic, what St. Thomas would say mental health is. So I'm going to read you what mental health is according to the American Psychological Association. Okay, it is a state of mind characterized by emotional well-being, good behavioral adjustment, relative freedom from anxiety and disabling symptoms, and a capacity to establish constructive relationships and cope with ordinary demands and stresses of life. So it doesn't necessarily tell you what is mental health. It kind of describes what it could look like if you are, I guess, mentally healthy. Um, St. Thomas has a different definition. I'll kind of summarize it. Basically, what he says is mental health is when your faculties, designed by God Himself, are operating the way they were designed. It's kind of like when the car is operating the way the manufacturer wanted it to operate, you got a healthy vehicle, right? That's pretty much what mental health is. And he specifies that pretty much your intellect is the key faculty. When your intellect, which is able to understand truth, can understand it, can judge truth as it is, and reason through properly without any infringement, impediment, you name it, that is a mentally healthy person. That's
Yeah.
mental health.
Yeah, it's kind of like the first definition sounds like, what does it mean to be healthy? It means you don't have any diseases, right? But then you
Yeah,
compare somebody who's a professional athlete with just your average 30-year-old man who doesn't have any diseases. It's clear that one is healthier than the other, right? It's
right,
like health is a positive something. Mental health is a
right,
positive something. It means something. It doesn't mean that you lack something. It means that you have
right,
something, right?
right. No, exactly. I think it's easy to say, hey, when someone is struggling with X, Y, and Z, or they're not struggling with X, Y, and Z, then that is a mentally healthy person, right? That still doesn't necessarily tell me what is mental health, right? And I think that's the missing piece because they don't truly understand what is the human person to begin with. So we're kind of just rolling with it, coming up with like a guesstimate of what it is to be sort of healthy, right? But they really miss the mark.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think whenever you're dealing with mental health, it's important to know what it means exactly. Because fundamentally, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think what mental health is fundamentally is it's the mind's capacity to conform to reality, right? And
Yes.
somebody who is not delusional and knows that men are men and women are women, like it's just their mind conforming to reality. It's
Hmm.
just the mind
Hmm.
receiving truth and judging rightly. Whereas somebody who's mentally ill looks at reality and then, because of something going on, there's multiple causes probably, but they refuse to conform mind to reality, right? Is that
Hmm.
about right? Is that what you'd say about mental health, or is there something
That's
else?
that's exactly right. Yeah, it's basically there is a reality, there is a truth out there, and there is also a person that is truth itself, right? We can either conform to it or we can reject it or try to make it whatever it is we want it to be, right? If we conform to it, you're mentally healthy. If you reject it or make it what you want it to be, that's not in conformity to reality, that is mental illness, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so whenever you're working with people, what are some of the common problems that you see people running into over and over again? Or is there a common theme or not so much?
Um, I think there are definitely themes. I work with so many different types of people, different temperaments and backgrounds. So there is some nuance, but I think um, one way you can describe it is what the general struggles are. So anxiety, low self-esteem, procrastination, lack of discipline. Obviously, lust is a huge one. But I think those, although they're incredibly important, there's something deeper underneath that they struggle with that I'm starting to pick up on. And it's actually they don't have custody of the mind.
Mm,
And I think there's a product that is a product of, well, I think just in general we struggle with that. But even now, right, we're so inundated with stimuli and distractions, right? Yep, that thing right there. There it is, right? And so what I'm noticing is that when I'm talking to my clients, right, whether they're again self-esteem or procrastination or lust or anxiety, you name it, what is the thing that underlies all that? They don't know how to direct their mind towards what is
Mm,
good, towards what is true. Their mind goes everywhere. And it seems subtle almost, right? Because I could be at the dinner table with my family, and right, my daughter could be talking about, her soccer practice, and my mind wanders to this conversation that I'm going to have today, and what I want to do, and hey, what am I going to talk about? And then I talk like this weekend. I'm super excited. It's going to be awesome, right? And then what happens? I'm not present,
yeah.
right? And my emotions follow what my imagination is filled with, right? So you just pick whatever it is your imagination is filled with, whether it's the future thing that you're not sure about, whether it's that girl you saw at the gym, you name it, that becomes then the beginnings of what we see and what a lot of people talk about. It's lust, it's depression, it's anxiety, whatever. But what I'm noticing is there's something deeper that actually speaks to all of those issues. And
Yeah.
one of those major things it's the lack of custody of the mind.
That's a really good observation. Yeah, I think the way that St. Thomas kind of conceptualizes this, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like for St. Thomas, the intellect is the foundation of the entire moral and spiritual life, right? You can't love, you can't use your will, you can't will something that you don't have some concept of in your intellect. So you start with the
Mm-hmm,
intellect, you have to know the right stuff, right? This is why St.
mm-hmm,
Paul makes a big emphasis on you have to have the faith, right? You have to know
mm-hmm,
what you're supposed to believe in order to be saved. So
mm-hmm.
you have your intellect, and then your intellect's job is to inform your will. And you can break this down for us here in a little bit. Maybe I'd love to hear what
Yeah.
you have to say about some of this, but your intellect informs your will. So
Mm-hmm,
because you know certain things, you will certain things in a certain way, right? This is why the
mm-hmm.
information that people have, if it's bad, they turn out to make bad decisions. If it's good, they at least have a chance. I'm not saying they do, but they at least have a chance to make good decisions.
Right,
So the
right.
fundamental thing that you have to get right is your intellect. Your intellect informs your will and helps you to determine what's good and what's evil. And then downstream from that are, I think the word you used was faculties, right? So like your
Mm-hmm,
emotions and all these other
mm-hmm.
things that we got going on a day-to-day basis. But it goes this
Yeah.
downstream pathway from intellect to will, and then will to emotions. But it's got to start with that custody of the mind, like you're talking about. It's got to start with a
Mm-hmm,
well-formed and well-trained intellect. Everything else is downstream from that.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So the appetites, like the will and your emotions, those are considered appetites. St. Thomas just basically says your will is an intellective or intellectual appetite. And then you have your emotions, right? We won't get into the language because I wish St. Thomas used easier words, but
That's what
that's
we're
those
for,
are the
right? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So he basically, you have your appetites, what you desire, right? Your will desires the good, right? And then your lower appetites desire what you think is good, the perceived good, right? That is a particular thing, that food, that car, that job, whatever it is, right? What St. Thomas says is the appetites are actually blind faculties. So they cannot move unless they're informed by something,
Mm.
right? Your lower faculties are informed by your senses, what you experience in the world, right? You can see something and be moved. You can feel something experientially, right? I want that steak that I see, the person eating next to me in the booth at the restaurant, right? Or I can have an aversion to something I think is evil for whatever reason, right? So it's a blind faculty. They don't move unless they're given something. And just to your point too, the will, which is also a blind faculty, can't move unless the intellect, hoping it's properly formed, gives the will the true good to then go and carry out to pursue or receive, right? And so, yeah, it is absolutely crucial that if we want to achieve mental health, and I think of that as like holiness, right? We want to be like Christ.
Yeah.
We need to understand what's going on within our nature so that we can kind of move them and work to correct them in the way that God designed them.
Yeah. Christ was so mentally healthy that he's the divine physician, right? It's
Yes,
like, he's not just
exactly.
mentally healthy, he's the guy that's fixing all of us who are messed up, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
great.
So
I love that.
talk to me here a second here. Do you find that the problem for a lot of guys is a sort of lack of intellectual formation? I know that you're talking about custody of the mind, which is similar to, related to intellectual formation, but not the exact same. You feel like a lot of guys just don't know how to be mentally healthy? Like they would do it. They're good people. They're trying to do the right thing, but they just have no idea where to start. Is that kind of what
Hmm.
you're experiencing, or is it something else?
I think that is a big piece of it because men don't know, and men and women, right? But I work mainly with men. They don't know themselves. And I
Yeah.
think when I say know themselves, there's two parts to that. Their nature generally as a human person, but also their particular nature. We have different temperaments and tendencies, inclinations, right? Most men come to me and they have zero clue. All they know is I'm not following through with this. I keep yelling at my kids. I said I was going to do that thing and I'm not. I keep falling into that sin and I told myself the last time was going to be the last time, right? That's what they come to me with. And then what I do is it is that intellectual formation, right? Custody of the mind comes later. You need to know yourself, right? And the example I give is if you are coming to me as your personal trainer, I would imagine I'm not a personal trainer, but I would imagine the person I'm working with, I would like to know their anatomy, their structure, their previous injuries. I would like to know me personally as the fitness coach. I probably should know like the basic structure of a human person and how the muscles work together, right? So that I take what I know about human anatomy and then I understand this person's particular anatomy. And then I say, here's a plan for you, and then you're going to build these skills, right? Day in and day out, week by week to achieve a certain goal. That is absolutely absent in psychology,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I feel like Thomistic psychology does what modern psychology is supposed to do. Like
Exactly.
it actually gets results and it gives you reasons and it gives you a cause and effect analysis, and you remove the cause or
Yes.
change the cause and you get a different effect, right? It's so scientific
Right.
and intellectually pleasing. And as far as the temperaments thing goes, we can maybe do a whole like hour long
Yeah,
show
that
on
would
the
be fun.
temperaments thing.